Good morning. It's good to see everyone here this morning. If you would, please stand and be with our worship this morning. Welcome, Holy Spirit. Oh, gosh, show us that. Amen. You may be seated.
I nearly tripped and fall on my face and nobody laughs.
We'll do it again, we'll laugh.
I'm glad that somebody forgot to turn the cameras on because that might have been
Oh,
embarrassing.
the real camera's on, mine's just the backup.
Well, make sure it's turned around the
It has
right way
been
today.
saved for posterity.
Good morning, everyone. Glad y'all was able to make it out this morning. If you are watching from home, we're glad that you joined us this morning for our services. And if you did not catch it on the camera, when I come up on the stage, I missed a step and nearly fell on my face right here in front of everybody. But I caught myself, I didn't fall. Anyway, guess a few announcements this morning would be that it's going to be a lot like it was last week. Not a whole lot of announcements. Because we're still kind of in this transition period about all of getting back in here and getting everything rolling back as usual. Not a whole lot going on within the church except for Sunday morning services. Wednesday night services are still on Facebook Live and Zoom. And with Jerry, and Jerry has mentioned before he prefers the Zoom option because he can interact, face-to-face interaction, but if you prefer the Facebook Live, he's not going to be upset about that either. A few prayer requests. I don't know if everybody's seen it on Facebook or not. Lane Wilson, which was one of our seniors that we actually honored last week, had a little accident, burned his arm, burned his face a little bit. So I guess you could say he played with fire. And anyway, he had a little burn. It's looking a lot better from what I've seen this morning or last night. It's looking a lot better than it was when it happened. So we continue to pray for him and that he wouldn't have any major scarring or major issues with any kind of infection or anything like that. Yes, I was trying to figure out how to word that one. But just remember Carol and Bobby Warren in your prayers. They are dealing with some home stuff right now, and I will leave it at that. If you want any information about that, call her because she'll tell you what she wants to be known for sure. But just pray for them. Bobby had surgery, I believe, this last week too, as well. Tuesday? And pray for them. And then a few other unspoken prayer requests that will not be mentioned at this time. They can be mentioned later on as things develop.
David, we had one.
Yep. On Bobby, we visited with him quite a while yesterday. The medicines, the pain medicines or something is really messing with his stomach, intestine. You know what I'm
His
talking about?
insides.
Yeah.
And, he went in the house twice. Don't know what he was, and come back. Come find out he was throwing up. He's been throwing up all day. And dry heaving, because he said, I can't even eat,
Wow.
And of course, I'm sure worrying about the situation. And, they stopped his job. They've even sold out up there. He don't even have a job.
Right.
And, there's a whole lot of stuff going on there.
Yes.
That's, they need lots of prayer, and that ain't all they need, but, they need I told him, I said, I failed you, I failed a lot of this church, because they're my family, and I haven't checked on people like I should. Donna, I haven't checked on, there's so many. And we need to do that, all of us. We need to be, not just on Facebook, say, if there's anything you need, give me a call. I'll give them a call.
Well, and I'll say this.
Not just them, but the family.
I know a lot of times we'll text somebody, and that becomes, what Jim just said, that becomes just kind of a whatever term. If you need anything, call
They ain't gonna call,
me. No, most people are not gonna ask for help.
just do it.
Just go over there and do it. Yesterday, one of the guys I work with, he's real big into these 1980s model Chevrolet pickups with the big blocks on them. And they were tearing a big block 454 down, for those of y'all know what that is. And he called me, he's like, hey, can you come help me? Bring your boys over, we're gonna show them how this works and do that. And I'm like, I'm there. But I told him Friday, I said, hey, if y'all get into that, need some help, holler at me. Well, he actually called me and we were there. I think we spent 4 or 5 hours over there, and we got into it a lot more than what we were planning on. But once we got into it, we realized that it needed to go all the way to the block. But that's just one of those things. Very few people are going to call. So we need to check on each other.
We need to make that call.
Exactly. We have to make that call, not wait for them to ask for help. We need to be paying attention enough to recognize that somebody needs help.
One other thing, speaking of a call, we backed into the parking spot out there and the phone rang, Sunny Hills. And some of y'all know Mama's in Sunny Hills. They told us they felt like this was her last week. And they're gonna let us come see her today, and we hadn't.
We hadn't seen her since March 1st, so.
I said, I gotta see her. They said, we're gonna create a room for you, y'all come on.
Well, I kind of overheard Sandy. I was back in the office for a minute. I kind of overheard Sandy. I was eavesdropping a little bit, Sandy. I'm sorry. But y'all pray for them. That was one of the unspokens that I kind of mentioned.
She's ready.
She's been ready.
She's been ready for a while.
But y'all pray for Jim and Sandy and Chuck and Julie and that entire family. That's going to be a hard situation. How old is Joanne?
85,
85?
86.
85,
She's
86?
just turned turned 86, May the 25th, and we didn't get to go birthday and everything.
She had a cake, but we didn't get to go.
Yeah, we sent something.
I bet she enjoyed her cake.
But she did, she loves cake.
But pray for that family, and as far as offering goes, kind of try to move along a little bit here. Offering, once again, we're not going to be passing plates here in the building, but there are plates at either of the back doors or either of the side doors. You can drop your tithes and offerings in that, or you can do it online, or you can drop it off over at the self-storage, Rock Island self-storage as well, and they will make sure that it gets up here to the church. And I believe online giving, I guess it's still working. We had that option. I'm assuming that is posted to our Facebook page somewhere, or
On the website.
website. Okay. She does it, so I don't know. Birthdays for this week. If you had a birthday, once again, happy birthday. If you had an anniversary this week, happy anniversary. Let's see. We'll go ahead and I'll have, see if Buck, will you open us up in prayer? As soon as Buck is done praying, Tony, it's back to y'all.
Thank you, Lord, for this day that you made, and bless us with health. Church family, pray that you would all these that mentioned this morning, and all the ones that weren't mentioned, unspoken requests. Just thank you for this opportunity to come back in your house again, and just pray that you would lead us and move our church. Help us to stay in contact with them. We this one. We pray that you will walk in with your love and compassion, and we know that you will. Just anoint him with knowledge of the word of your praise. Father God, we love you. We just praise your holy name. And all of God's children said, Amen. You can be seated.
I want everybody to know Robert Howard had another procedure this week, and that's why they're not here. He's not got over it, recovered yet.
Yeah.
Something like that. He said if he had all this to do over again, he would not do it. He says it's pretty painful.
Yeah, I noticed he had posted on Facebook, I guess yesterday, that he had another procedure this week. Yeah, we do want to continue to remember all of those in prayer, and of course, in our prayers, we not only want to remember those that we know and we love that are struggling, but remember a lot of other folks that are struggling with things, they're confused with things, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're afraid. There's a lot of different things going on in the world, and I think it's appropriate. Passage of scripture we're going to look at this morning. But before we actually get there, I want to tell a story. I'm going to call this a parable. There it is. It's a story to make a point. It's not a true story. But it's a parable. Think of it as, Jesus told a lot of things in parables. He did it well. I may not do it so well. But there was a group of people, and they had, it's crazy whenever your watch does funky things and interrupts what you're doing. I'm thinking, why is this buzzing at me? I'm not getting a phone call. And so my watch just told me I reached a goal in the number of steps that I've taken today. I go, okay, I don't know how far I've gone, but how that's possibly a goal, I don't know. But it sure interrupted my train of thought when my wrist started buzzing. It's like one time back when I wore a beeper.
Yeah.
And I always left it in the desk before I went in to preach on Sunday morning. And one Sunday morning, I heard somebody's beeper going off, and I stopped and I let them have a chance to do it. And nobody was moving. I kept looking around to see whose it was. Went off a second time. I commented on it. That, well, God, are you trying to tell us something? Just trying to, After it was over, after the service was completely over, I found my beeper in my pocket. And the several calls that I had missed. So that Sunday night, I had to apologize to everybody because it was me. So we're going to back up now. We're going to go back to the parable. There was a group of people who had something in common. What they had in common was their appreciation for salt. They liked the way that it tasted. And they actually discovered that they had some differences in the flavors of it, because there's some different things that can be added to salt to make it taste a little bit different. And so there were some who kind of liked just plain table salt. There were some who more liked kosher salt. There were some who found out that pink Himalayan salt was a little bit more healthy. There were some who really liked garlic, and so they really liked garlic salt. There were some who liked celery salt. There were some who liked jalapeno salt. There were some who liked seasoned salt that had all kinds of stuff in it. And so they got together and they talked about how great salt was and how much they liked salt. And they would even bring the kind of salt they liked the best. And sometimes while they were in the room together, they would take the lid off and they would sprinkle it on things and they would taste it. They would sample it and they would find out, hey, this is some pretty good stuff. But then when it came time to leave their gathering, they put the lid on their salt and they put it back in the cabinet so it would be there the next time they got together. Now you see where I'm going with this, right? Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus says something. He says, you are the salt of the earth. I'll tell you some things that he doesn't say before we go on with that. He doesn't say, you ought to be the salt of the earth. He says, you are the salt of the earth. He doesn't say, you ought to like the salt of the earth. He says, you are the salt of the earth. He doesn't say that you should form a salt appreciation society. He doesn't say that you should save your salt for a special occasion. He says you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? Now I want to tell you, all those different kinds of salt I mentioned a while ago, that and about probably 40 other ones I've got in my cabinet at home because I like all different kinds of seasoning, and I do a lot of cooking. I have done most of the cooking in our 36 years of marriage, and I love to play with different things and invent things and all that. And I mean, let me go in the grocery store. I have got to go to the clearance shelf, and if there is a spice that I don't have, I'm going to get it because I figure when it's on clearance, that's the time to get it and try it. If I don't like it, I'll never get it again. Of course, if I do like it, it's on clearance because they don't make it anymore, and I'll never get it again anyway.
Yeah.
That's beside the point. But I like all that. But every once in a while, I'll dig something out of the cabinet that, if you look at the use by date, the first number is not a 2. And it's not going to taste good. I mean, some stuff I don't worry about the date that's on it, but sometimes it really does go bad. And you think, what a waste that I've had this sitting in my cabinet all these years and I never use it. It's not good for anything. And Jesus said, if the salt has lost its taste, if it's tasteless, how can it be made salt again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown and trampled underfoot by men. It's not good for anything except to throw it out on your driveway, you know, to keep from slipping on the ice or to absorb something or whatever. But the point of all that is we are to be salt, not appreciate salt.
Yeah.
And when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, think about the things that salt was used for. Primarily 2 things. One of them certainly is to flavor things. Okay? Now some people really like salt. My dad was that way. You know, it didn't matter what was on his plate and how it had been seasoned before it got on his plate in front of him. It didn't matter if it was at home or if it was in a restaurant or whatever. The first thing he was going to do is pick up the salt shaker and salt everything.
I know something like that.
Yeah. So, really like the taste of salt. Now, I rarely salt anything after it's been cooked because I like to season it ahead of time. So something has to be pretty bland for me to want to put salt on it. But salt does, in the right amount, bring out the flavor of whatever the food is. It seasons and enhances the flavor of the food. Right? Think about that in terms of when Jesus says you are the salt of the earth. You are to be that which, when you interact with the world around you, it ought to bring out the best. It ought to enhance the very best of everything around you. The fact that you show up ought to make everything else better. That's the seasoning aspect. Well, the other thing salt was used for was what? a preservative. You know, refrigerators are a relatively new invention in the history of the world. One of the few things that I brought home that I'm going to keep that my dad had was an antique ice box. You know, and some people, you know, you couldn't figure out why somebody called a refrigerator an ice box just because they remembered the days when what you had was that box that had that metal lining inside it, and you put a block of ice in there to keep stuff cool for a little while. And I brought that home. I'm going to use that for something in my office. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to use it for, but it's probably going to replace something that's not nearly as cool looking. But when there was not refrigeration, something could last longer if it was rubbed with salt. So if we think of ourselves in terms of you are the salt of the earth in seasoning, that is in whenever we show up, we are enhancing the good, and in every situation that we show up in, we are bringing out the best of it. That's the seasoning. Or what's the preservative part? Preservative. It's the preserving part, the preservative part. What are we preserving? Well, some of us are pretty good at preserving traditions. Some of us are pretty good at preserving things that we like. In fact, it bugs us when we see things that we like that are going by the wayside. We're not called to preserve our preferences. We're not called to preserve our traditions. We're called to preserve the purity and truth of the gospel. So think about that. You are the salt of the earth. And wherever you go, it is your task, I start to say, but actually what it is your nature as followers of Jesus. It's not simply a job we have to do. It is who we are. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. And so it is both your nature and your job because of your nature that as you interact with the world, you are preserving truth and enhancing good. And you have to know how much it takes for each of those. And so, just like it made me a little crazy that my dad threw salt on everything, but it didn't make me nearly as crazy that my dad did that as it does if I go to eat with somebody in a Mexican restaurant. And when they bring out the chips, the first thing they do is grab the salt shaker and shake them on top of the whole basket of chips, because I don't want extra salt on my chips. Well, that other person might say, but it's better with salt. And I might say, but I don't care. If you want to salt your chips, put your chips on your plate and salt them. That's what I want to say. I usually don't. What I usually do is I grab some of the chips and I shake the salt off of them and I put them on my plate. But here's where I'm going with that. We got to know how to salt. If we are the salt of the earth and we are bringing that into every situation, we still got to know how to do it. We've got to be able to read the situation and know how to be salt. Because sometimes we can be so salty that we gag people. And then we don't get to pat ourselves on the back and say, but I was salt. Oh, it's not doing any good if we're gagging people. So how about if it is our nature to be salt, and it is our task to be salt, then we pay attention to each situation to know just how much is needed, because every recipe doesn't call for the same amount of salt.
Right.
If we would do a little bit more listening and a little bit more looking and be a little bit slower to speak we might find out that Jesus would use us in ways that are better than what we would envision for ourselves. You've heard the old joke, you know, you got twice as many ears as you got mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. You also got 2 eyes, you should look twice as much as you speak. You are the salt of the earth. So wherever you go, preserve the truth of the gospel and season every circumstance to bring out the best in it. Well, then Jesus went to a second metaphor. Some people understood salt. Let's talk about the second one. You are the light of the world. He didn't say you ought to be the light of the world. He didn't say you ought to like the light of the world or appreciate the light of the world. He said you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. I have had an opportunity lots of times in my life to do some traveling in different places. And some things that we don't have very much in our neck of the woods, and by our neck of the woods, I don't simply mean Wise County, I mean kind of the United States, because we're a relatively new civilization here. But there are places that I have seen in some of my travels in Europe that you really do. You'll see this big castle and all this over around it up on top of a hill. And I remember the first trip that I had in 1984 was a college choir tour, and we were toured Austria and Hungary, and we're riding this bus through the countryside there, and I look up and I see this big castle and all the stuff surrounding it up on top of this hill, and you couldn't miss it. I mean, from miles and miles around, you couldn't miss it. And I had that thought as a college student sitting on that bus. It came to mind for me. I actually have it written down in a journal somewhere. I'm not too good at keeping up with stuff, so it's probably stuck in a box or in a drawer somewhere. But I actually had it written down in there, the little journal that I kept of that trip. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And here's the point Jesus was making. Once you become a follower of Jesus and your identity is changed, once that happens to you, you're going to be visible. There is no such thing as a secret follower of Jesus. There's no such thing as a secret Christian. There's no such thing as I'm just going to keep it to myself. You can't be hidden. Somebody is watching. And so Jesus said it doesn't make any sense. And he goes on to say that it does. This is how much it doesn't make any sense. Nor do men light a lamp and put it under a peck measure, this translation says, or some of us remember this little light of mine, had it under a bushel note, because that was the King James translation. But put it on a lampstand so it gets all to the house. The purpose of light is to shine. The purpose of light is not to be hidden. The purpose of light, it doesn't make any sense to do that. Now, and then he says, and this, I think, ties the whole thing together, both the salt and the light metaphor. He says, let your light so shine before men, in front of people, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Now, let your light shine in such a way talking about the way in which we shine our light. It's also talking about the way in which it's the way in which we fulfill our identity both as salt and light. There is a method. And the method is we do it in such a way that when people see us, they don't say how wonderful we are. But they give glory to God.
Yeah.
Now they might notice first in us something that is worth seeing. But if ever we live in such a way as to draw attention to ourselves, then we are not fulfilling the purpose of our identity. But the point is to draw attention to Jesus. And that's why it's important that's the preservative part. That's why it's important that we are preserving the truth of the gospel and not just making things taste better. Because, I can just show up in my natural coolness. Like I am a lot of that. But, there are people that do. And I could just show up in my natural, just kind of good guy, that kind of stuff. And I can make a situation a little better. But if I don't pay attention to the preservative part, and make sure that I'm preserving the truth of the gospel, pointing to Jesus, letting my light shine in such a way that what good you see in me actually goes to the glory of God, then I'm not fulfilling my purpose. I'm not fulfilling my identity.
Amen.
When David was telling a story earlier about hanging out with the guy and working on his truck and that kind of stuff. Okay, you spent 4 or 5 hours. I don't know anything about who else was there or anything like that. But what you got to do is you got to spend 4 or 5 hours doing a little salting. And sometimes we do that with fellow believers, and sometimes we do that with people who are not yet part of the family of God. But we can step into a situation and pay attention and listen and have conversations and pray and ask God to show us and give us sensitivity and do a little bit of salting. And here's the great thing about that. God has no shortage of His supply of salt. You cannot exhaust your saltiness. You can fail to use it and let it sit up on the shelf and get stale. And you can be so overpowering with it that it makes people gag, but you can't use it up. You say, well, I've got to ration my salt, because then I won't have it for the next situation. No, if you use it right, God just keeps supplying. Because we are the salt. And if we are allowing Him to live His life through us, then He will continue to supply us with the ability to season and preserve and shine a light on the goodness of God.
Amen.
I think in a lot of ways for the last few weeks, it has been such a situation of disequilibrium, as a word that I would use. Is we feel like everything's out of balance, and we don't know what to do and how to do it, and when to go and when to stay and when to engage and when to back off, and there's still a lot of questions about that. But here's what we can't do. We can't say, I'm going to hold my salt until everything opens all the way up.
You're right.
We can't say I'm going to hold my salt until somebody says, now you can do whatever you want to. Of course, whatever you want to is always a risky proposition anyway. But we can't say I'm going to hold my salt till I got it all figured out. We can't say I'm going to hold my salt until I can do it the way that I am accustomed to doing it. Just come back to Jesus again and say, you said that I am the salt, not that I have salt. So help me. Help me as I step into each situation to bring out the best, to preserve the truth of the gospel, to shine a light, not a light that originates with me, because Jesus elsewhere said that, Jesus said of himself, I am the light of the world.
Right.
And so the light that we are shining as the light of the world, as he talks about here, it's light that we receive from him.
Yeah.
But in each situation, as we season, as we preserve, as we shine, we do it in such a way that people who are confused, deceived, afraid, angry, are able to see something different. And then wouldn't it be better when tensions are high to shine a little bit of light and season with a little bit of salt than to dump gasoline on it? Jesus didn't anywhere say in there, you are the gasoline of the world. Could be the gasoline hadn't been invented, so he wouldn't have said that. But get my point. Part of being who we are is not getting sucked into acting like everybody else does, but to come into the situation, a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of preservative, a little bit of light, and trust God to do his work through us.
Amen.
So here's what I want you to think about as we get ready to go out of here. Some of us know a few things that are going to happen in the next week. We knew, we got some idea of where we're going to go. We've got some appointments. We've got some things some responsibilities. There are some things that we still don't know. Because I guarantee you, there has never been a day that I have had everything, known in advance, everything that was going to be a part of it. It just doesn't happen. But what I'm challenging us to do is to look at the week ahead and begin to pray for the things that we do know about and say, God, help me to show up as salt and light, and not just to show up because there's an appointment or because there's a responsibility. Help me to show up as salt and light.
Amen.
And then, God, for the things that I don't yet know about, the things that are going to be a surprise, and sometimes they'll be a good surprise, and sometimes they'll be a oh my gosh surprise, but either way, help me to show up as salt and light.
Right.
Help me to be who you created me to be.
Right.
So that everybody who I come in contact with will have an opportunity to give praise to you.
Amen.
So I want you to bow your head with me right now. And I want you to just think ahead over the next few days. Think of the things that you know you have going on over the next few days. And just ask God right now for those things that you know of, those things you have an awareness of. Ask God right now. God, begin preparing me right now to show up as salt and light. And then I want you to take a moment and acknowledge to God that you are trusting Him right now to help you show up as salt and light for the things that come as a surprise to you. That you want Him to do the work in your heart to prepare you, that no matter what comes, that you'll show up as salt and light. No matter how frustrating it is. No matter how hurtful it is. But that God, you're preparing us to show up as salt and light in every situation. So that people, when they look at us, will have opportunity to bring praise to you. I'm just going to ask you to spend these moments reflecting on that, praying, asking God to speak to your heart, asking God to do in your heart what you need to do to make the adjustments in your life. Tony and worship team are just going to sing our hymn of invitation and reflection. Again, right now we're not doing a come forward invitation, but I just ask you to, where you are, spend these moments. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be available. But just right now, as this song, let's use this time, let's spend this time with God. Ask Him how He wants to prepare you to walk out of here to be salt and light in every situation.
Please stand.
And before we go, I want to make sure I understood this right. Well, you're going to see your mom this afternoon, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to pray especially for Jim and Chuck and their family and this time together. And so let's just pray for them right now, and then will be dismissed. Father, you have done a great work and provided an incredible legacy in the Lambert family. And Father, for this dear mother, this matriarch, as she approaches the time where she will step into your presence and see you face to face, and she will be more alive than she has ever been.
Amen.
And Father, for her, we can do nothing but rejoice
Right.
and celebrate and be grateful that all of the limitations that she has experienced over these last years of life are going to be gone. And Father, we're thankful for that, but we also know that it's hard for this family. God, I pray that this time together this afternoon would be a precious time. And Father, we don't know how long you're going to give her. Those that pay attention to things seem to think that it's not going to be long. God, I just pray for a blessed goodbye. I pray for her to know how much she's loved. And I pray for these sons and daughters-in-law and others in the family to rejoice in her life and to know that they have been loved. God, we all walk this journey of life and experience loss. And it's hard. But thank you, Father, that we do not grieve as those who have no hope. And it's all because of Jesus, in whose name we pray.